Hello and welcome to the Behind the Bricks podcast, formerly known as the Source Property podcast. But we've got a fancy new studio. We've renamed ourselves. We've completely rebranded the entire company, hopefully so that you don't realise that we haven't recorded a podcast for the last 18 months. But we're back and we're here to say. So we're going to be releasing podcasts regularly. This is the first one. So you're very welcome and thank you very much for coming to say hello. So this series of podcasts is going to be all about flips. If you want to hear about plasterers getting pissed, if you want to hear about builders buying drug dens, if you want to hear about why you should focus on probate properties when you're looking at flips, then this is the right series of podcasts for you. So this is the first podcast in a series of 7 podcasts. Now, it's going to be all about flips. So the next 7 podcasts are going to be about the intricacies, the detail about identifying flips, finding flips, how you assess flips, how you secure them, how you move forward with flips, how you manage the build, loads and loads of information specifically about flips. And we want to do this because we've looked at other people's podcasts. We've looked at the podcasts that we've done previously, and we've seen that what we want to do, what we want to achieve is give you guys practical, deliverable help to show you how to go through property, not just listen to Tim. I'll introduce you in a second. Sorry, Tim. Okay. Not just listen to Tim and listen to all the stuff that Tim's done, because that might not actually help you move forward. So what we're doing with this series of 7 podcasts is looking specifically in detail at flips and showing you how to go through that process of finding and delivering and making money out of a flip. Now, what we need is an expert in flips. So we've asked Tim to come in. So hello, Tim.
Hello, Chris.
And the reason that we've asked Tim to come in, Tim's part of the Source Network. And over the last couple of years, flips are something that you've really focused on and you've done particularly well on. So even though we don't want to focus on it, do you want to just give us an overview as to the kind of stuff that you've done within property and flips?
Okay, I've bought various different properties, some direct to vendor, some at auction, some on the market, typically refurbed them, added value, and then refinanced it and rented it out. That seemed to be the one thing that I kind of focused on, really.
Amazing. So some really good value. And one of the things that I really like about the way that you've gone about it is you focused on this as a strategy, but then everything else is flexible. So you haven't particularly looked at one way of buying flips or one agent that you've got them through or one type of thing. You've looked at different ways of securing and finding those properties, right?
Yes.
So well done to you.
Why, thank you.
So this first podcast, we're going to look at what is a flip. So we're going to identify what the next podcasts are going to be about. So tell me, Tim.
Okay.
The kind of flips that you've done, what have you focused on?
Okay, so what I focused on primarily is pretty much probate properties in bad condition, your very stereotypical property.
So what do you mean by a probate property? Just, unpack that.
So someone's parents or an old person or someone has died, probably not, well, maybe in the property.
Nice and concise, thanks very much.
Yeah. And then the property's obviously quite dated, with an 80s bathroom or older. Quite often I've ended up buying properties with all their contents in as well. I've bought properties that were drug dens, all sorts, very, very bad condition. And then just basically added the value, made it as high a value as you can do for the street. So it will value up to the maximum. And then I've refinanced it, pulling out all my money plus some, or in worst case scenario, I've left about £8,000 in the property. I think that's my worst one.
So somebody's passed away. To look at the probate properties particularly, somebody's passed away and that house is being inherited by somebody else.
Yes.
But the person that's passed away hasn't put any love, care and attention into that house for a period of time. And so it could do with being refurbished. And because it needs a refurbishment, that means that it's underpriced for relatively to the other houses on that street.
Yes. Yeah.
And the drug den, similar situation, but obviously somebody might not have passed on. It's just an undervalued property because of the condition of the property at that point. And that's what you focused on, the ones that are in poor condition to then fix up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. How competitive is the market for flips?
Oh, at the moment, insanely competitive.
And why do you think that is?
Ridiculously so. At the moment, obviously mortgage interest rates are quite low. Bank interest rates are quite low. So despite things like the Renters' Rights Reform Bill going through, people are still looking at property as a good investment. So it's there's a lot of competition. People are unsure kind of whether or not their pension will pay off. So they're looking to diversify their income opportunities when they get older. As a result, you've got a lot of investors buying more properties, which makes everything, basically even the kind of typical flip project, the price go up, which does make things harder.
And they're quite easy to understand, aren't they, flips? It's quite a straightforward thing. You buy something that's in really poor condition, you put some money into it, you fix it up, and you're going to sell something that's in a better condition, and therefore it's going to be worth more money. And you can work out, if you know how, which we'll get to in another podcast, if you know how to do that, it's quite an easy equation to go through.
In theory, the practice is easy. Like you say, it's same as anything else. Buy low, add value, and then sell high, or refinance high. So it is very, on paper, very simple.
And presumably you're in and out of a flip quite quickly, whereas if you're doing a bigger project that's going to take 2 years or so, you are a victim of the market over that 2-year period. You've got to predict that the market is still going to be there for when you initially do your due diligence at the very beginning to when you're selling it at the end, because that's when you need the market to be there. Whereas a flip is probably going to be a shorter project, so it's a bit more predictable. Would you say?
It is. Again, that's something to kind of cover in the research. There's one property I bought, and during the refurb time, the projected end value had actually dropped by about 10,000, but I had kind of allowed a bit of a buffer in my figures, so that wasn't really a big issue. But the market does change very, very quickly.
So why the market's competitive? The market changes quickly.
Yep.
Why do you think you've been successful? What have you done that's helped you achieve what you've wanted to achieve? Because it's not just one flip that you've done that you've made a decent amount of money from. It's a number of flips over a period of time. So why are you successful when other people might not have been?
I would say perseverance, really. So I did my first one, and I probably was too active in it. I was painting the walls. I was there every weekend, insulating floors, trying to do the loft.
Is this the one where you damaged your elbow?
Yes. Yeah. So that one, I massively spent far too much time in there, got far too involved in it. And then after the first one, I kind of stepped back for about 8 months just to kind of recover and thought, what have I done?
Yeah.
And then after that, I kind of sat back and thought, well, hang on, where am I going in my life? What goals have I got, and how am I going to get there?
Yeah.
And then it was a case of sitting down and going, okay, well, best way that I can see that seems to have worked from what I've done previously is to do this. Mm-hmm. So I then went straight in and bought another.
So explain then how that first one was different from the second, third, and fourth.
The first one, I got too involved, too hands-on.
That's it. You were just in there too much.
Yeah. It was also just kind of after COVID as well. So there were a lot of challenges with that, with material prices, labour prices. It was a hard time to do one, very hard. And I learnt a lot during my first one.
So would you say, though, looking back at that first one, that you're actually quite grateful that you did do it yourself because of what you learned from taking it forward?
Yeah, it's given me a greater understanding of the order to do things, how long certain jobs take, what trades you can kind of cross-trade. So, for example, instead of using a plumber to do all of your plumbing, the fact that you can use your builder to do some of it, which will save you money. So it's just little things like that I kind of gained knowledge from where I was there so much. I used to go there every day. Every weekend I was there both days working away. Yeah, hard work.
And it's an easy solution to come to, because you think, well, if I do this myself, then I'm not going to employ somebody to do it for me. But then that project can last longer because you're doing the work yourself rather than getting a professional in. Yeah. So looking back at it, is that the outcome that you saw, that the project took longer because you were doing it yourself, but actually it didn't cost you less because of the extra time that it took because you were doing it?
It was pretty much a worse finish because obviously I'm not all of these trades professionally. It was more time consuming because again, I'm not as fast as a professional painter, for example. So there is a bit of a flip side of, okay, so the painter's going to cost me X amount or whoever, as opposed to my time. And also, how can I use my time more productively? Could I do something else that would generate more money that would then pay for a painter or pay for a labourer? So I did a lot of like clearing out a cellar, which is basic stuff that you can pay a labourer, say £50 a day to do. So instead of doing that, I'm better off doing something else that would earn more, but more delegation, I'd say.
Yep. And you put that into practice for the second, third.
Yeah.
With such a competitive market,
Okay.
do you think there's still room for other people to get involved in flips? Or do you think the market is saturated?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in it, but I think if you've been trained right, you've got the right support, and you're working with people that know what they're doing, or you've got people that you can bounce ideas off with, and if you're kind of very dedicated to it, then yes, there is room. If you just blindly jump in, then you'll probably end up paying over the odds for something, signing up for things that you don't know with hidden clauses, being ripped off. So yes, you can, but as long as you do it right.
So in that, I guess some other people would probably call that a power team. In that team that you have that stand by your side, that help you move forward, what did you find the most valuable in specifically your first one?
My first one was very much a learning curve. So the whole, I hate the phrase power team. It's like so cringy. But at that point I had certain key people, so I was really, really lucky. I talked to a lot of people. So I bought this house. I remember collecting the keys, going to see it. It was a really sunny day. Curtains were all drawn. It was a dark, dingy room, and it stank in there. There was stuff everywhere, and I thought, what have I done? And I stepped out into the street, and the sun was beating down on me. And then straight away, a couple of neighbours said, "Oh, have you bought that?" And it turned out one was an electrician and one was a builder that lived on the street. So even now, I still use the same electrician.
Okay.
So as you build your power team, as people like to call it, they do come in handy, and you can kind of rely on them and get to know how they work, really.
And there are still opportunities out there that are not being snapped up. So
Yeah.
there are flips out there. Yeah. There's more room in the market.
Yeah.
It's not a saturated market.
Yeah.
And I guess there's always going to be flips because there's always neglected properties that are coming onto the market.
Fresh people dying every day.
What a lovely thought, Tim. Thanks very much for that. Tell us one thing that you wish you knew before you started. Just as an overview, right? We're going to go into that specifically when we look at how you find the property, and then how you manage the refurbishment and how you find the builders and stuff like that. But just as an overview, what's like a big learning from starting to do flips?
Probably how much time it takes to do the research and everything. You see all these people on social media, and they're like, "I bought this, I've made this much, and I've turned it into this."
Yeah.
And they make it look so simple.
I've done Homes Under the Hammer for years and years and years before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how many years has that been going? Since before social media, computers and the internet, right?
Well, it's season 28 now, so it's a lot of seasons.
You're a Homes Under the Hammer nerd?
No, but I was on it. So, yeah. But what you don't see is all the hard work before, all of the research, all of the figures, checking the crime rates, getting the insurance, sorting out your finance, submitting hundreds of documents to your solicitors. You don't see all of that. And all of that takes so much time and knowing what to do.
Well, let's talk about that now, because the next podcast, we're going to go straight into how to find a flip. So when it comes to research, what is necessary?
Sure. Basically, I tend to look at, if I find, first of all, you need to figure out where your end product is, and then almost kind of work backwards. So what do you want from that property? Do you want capital appreciation, as in the one-off profit? Or do you want a high monthly profit? So I kind of work backwards from the rent if I'm going to keep it, for example.
Where did you start with your first?
My first, to be fair, absolutely the other end of, can I get a property? Can I find one that's in a bad state? And that was it. My sole kind of vision at that point was to get it and to sell it. Mm-hmm. That was it. I knew there was a bit in between where I'd make it look fancy. And that was what I was aiming for. But it was only when I was speaking to the electrician who kept saying, "What are you doing with it? What are you doing with it? I'll be interested in renting this," that I thought, okay, well, let's look into that route. And then he still is my tenant.
Yeah, okay.
Which is quite cool.
So what research was necessary for you to determine whether that was
for that one
option? I
knew what I could get it for, and I knew what it would be worth at the end. And then I had this bizarre bit in between. I knew ideally what my profit level was going to be.
Yeah.
And I knew very, very roughly what my kind of refurb costs were going to be.
Uh-huh. And did you get that confirmed by a builder, or was that just stuff that you worked out off the top of your head?
That was stuff I'd worked out on the top of my head, based on the training that I'd received through Sourced.
Right, okay. And then you mentioned a load of documents. So purchasing the property, how long did that take? How did you find the conveyancing process? Were there any learnings that you had from through there?
Yeah, so I mean, with the first one I bought, it was all tiered quite well. So the offer was made at £39,999 to keep it underneath the stamp duty threshold.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have a preferred solicitor to use at that point, so it was pretty much any solicitor. I also agreed to pay their legal fees and their estate agent fees on that one.
The current owner?
Yeah.
And why did you do that? Explain.
Yeah, she'd basically inherited the property from her ex-husband. She couldn't stand him, he couldn't stand her, and the last thing he wanted was for her to inherit the property, and she didn't want it at all.
Because it was in such a bad state, was it?
Not really, just because they hated each other. So the will never got changed, so she inherited the property.
Right, okay.
So it was almost like a double-edged sword. So on one hand, she'd be given this property. On the other hand, she didn't want it. So I was kind of helping her out by making it as smooth and as easy as possible for her. She didn't really have the money for the estate agent's fees, didn't really have the money for the legal fees, which is why the deal was structured to basically make it very appealing to her. So it was going to go on the market for about 50,000. I offered her a super quick purchase time on it being a cash purchase, with me covering all her fees. So she didn't have to outlay a penny. As a result, that enabled me to negotiate about £10,000 discount on the actual predicted kind of sale price, really.
So you bought it in cash, and then did you finance it after you bought it to make that all happen as quickly as possible?
No. So I bought it in cash, refurbed it whilst we were refurbing it. That was the point after I'd had the conversations with the electrician. That was the point that we then decided to start to try and refinance it, so that at the moment it was done, everything was finished, the valuer came in, valued it up, and the mortgage basically paid back everything I'd put into it. Do
you mind telling us the revalue amount?
Yeah, so paid 39 for it. Yeah. It valued up at 102,000, and I think we spent about 30 on it.
Right, okay.
Which was over what it actually needed. If I was doing the same one again now, I could probably do it for about 22.
Even if you were outsourcing everything to trades?
Yeah.
Well done. That's good. So any other learnings through that initial purchasing? Just how long did it take to purchase it then? If you're offering somebody a quick buy, obviously if you've got the money there, then that's part of that solved. But the legal side of it can also take a long time. So how did you find it?
It was still about 5 weeks. Even though it's quite a straightforward transaction, you've got the laws of it being in his name to be kind of passed on to her, so to speak.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there was a hidden charge on the property because the guy who owned it had moved into a care home, and the council had put a charge on the house so that they got some money back for the care when the property was sold. Things like that had to be resolved. But I think it was about 5 weeks that went through the conveyancing process, and then literally it was keys, and then where do I even begin with this one?
And then the works, how long did that take?
The works were, again, quite a long time period for me. So I think we started work in about August. I think we were done by about November, so it was quite a slow one because I just couldn't find trade people at the time. It was an absolute nightmare. But yeah, and then the tenant moved in December.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So for finding trades, why did you find it a problem then? How have you mitigated for that on the next deals that you've done?
At that point, I didn't know where to find them, apart from pretty much on Facebook Marketplace and just kind of...
Really? That's the first place that you'd look for?
Yeah, it was the first go-to.
Really?
Then I found websites like mybuilder.com.
Yeah.
However, again, you can get really scammed on them. My plasterer was an absolute nightmare that I pulled from there. So he came to the site...
Yeah.
Show me all these pictures of like a footballer's house that he supposedly had plastered. And I thought, yeah, this is great. And then literally he turned up every day with like bottles of bud and stuff and was totally drinking on the job. I couldn't get rid of him because one, I couldn't afford to. Secondly, there just weren't any plasterers about. And It looks like someone spread butter across toast and paste.
Wow.
It was bad.
So then how did you solve that problem for the next one?
The next one, I kind of vetted the people I was using a lot more.
Yeah. So instead of making a decision to go with the one person that is available, you would say no to that, sacrifice the timeline of your project and get the right person in.
Yes, to a degree. So obviously, the more you, well, not totally, but typically, the more you pay, the better job you're going to get.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is kind of offset at what point does your quality meet your price and budget. A bit like buying a new car or second-hand car. So you kind of find that happy medium of, right, okay, it's priced right and the finish is good for what I want.
Right, okay. Anything else you want to comment on for the build team and setting up the build team?
I mean, once you've got them, what you find is they know that you'll pay, they'll know how you work, they'll know what your expectations are. So the more you work with them, the better your relationship becomes. My builders will go out and view properties for me now without me even having to go, because they know that, one, they'll get the work, and two, I would be classed as a good customer because I'm paying them.
Sounds like a good power team. Well done.
Thanks.
Okay, so what we're going to do, every podcast, we're going to ask that same question, one thing that you wish you knew before you started.
Okay.
I'm also going to read out a question that we've been asked by somebody that's watching the podcast. So we've gone out to our network within Sourced, and we've asked them what question that they would like to ask you. And we've got a question for every one of these podcasts in this series. Now, the majority of the questions that came through, don't worry, I haven't told you about this, right? So you're not prepared for this. But the majority of the questions that came through were all about finding flips, because that's where people seem to struggle.
Yeah.
Now, the next podcast in the series is all about finding the flips. So we've done a brief overview for flips, explained what they are. The next podcast in the series is going to be specifically about finding flips. And so those property dilemma questions that we've had, we'll deal with in the next podcast.
Yeah.
But we'll spend a little bit of time on it because that's where the majority of the questions came in. So, like I say, the next podcast in the series is going to be specifically about finding flips. And so we'll get to hear a bit more about the ways in which, the different ways that you touched on previously, about how you found flips and the best way to secure those flips and outcompete that very, very competitive marketplace that you were talking about.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
So thanks very much, Tim.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Okay.
That's the end of episode number 1. Come back for episode number 2, where we're going to be talking about how to find a flip. If you want to be involved, if you want to contribute to the podcast, make sure that you're following us on socials, because on there we're going to put polls, we're going to put questions, and if you've got any property dilemmas, then you can communicate with us through the social platforms, and you can ask those property dilemmas, and maybe we're going to use them on the podcast. So thanks. We'll see you next time.